Some words as we summon ourselves to our hour of worship. This comes from the Hebrew prophet Micah. I use it often, especially at weddings, if you might think that odd. How shall I enter the Eternal's presence? Shall I come with sacrifices, with yearling calves to offer? Would the Holy One care for rams in thousands, or for oil flowing in myriad streams? What does the Holy One ask from you? But to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. Fountain Street Church is a place where we try not to be overwhelmed by the beauties of the world so much that we forget the duties of the world, to make the world as beautiful as we wish it to be. And here at Fountain Street Church, we come together on Sundays to remind ourselves of all the things worth saving and savoring. The responsive reading is taken from the artist Chuck Close. Chuck Close is a portraitist in very large sizes, and he divides the portrait into small quadrangles of paint. Each quadrangle is an abstraction, and together in aggregate they form a portrait. What's really key to him is that he suffered a major accident years ago, and he's now virtually quadriplegic and uses his hands without their fingers and a lifting device to get him up and down. So when he talks about creativity in this way, I want you to hear the background. This is a notable American artist who would be entirely disabled by most of our estimations. He says, "The advice I like to give to young artists, or really anybody who will listen to me, is not to wait around for inspiration. Inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us just show up and get to work. If you wait around for the clouds to part and a bolt of lightning to strike you in the brain, you're not going to make an awful lot of work. All best ideas come out of the process. They come out of the work itself. If you're sitting around trying to dream up a great idea, you can sit there a long time. But if you just get to work, something will occur to you and something else will occur to you. You feel like you need this great idea before you can get down to work. And I find that's almost never the case. Didn't expect. You think of artists as being people who just get struck by lightning. No. As Bob knows, it's playing a lot of scales before you get to make the music. It's stretching a lot of muscles and breaking them before you get to dance. We're here to stretch our spiritual muscles, to play the scales of rejoicing, as W.H. Auden called it, so that when the time comes, we can be the artists of the Spirit that we all long to be. My name's Fred Wooden. I'm one of the clergy who serve here at Fountain Street Church, a beacon and a sanctuary of liberal religion in Grand Rapids for now almost 150 years. If you're new to us, I met some faces earlier that are, and some others that I would like to meet afterward. Please come and say hello. This is a place where however you are and whoever you are, you're fine. And wherever you are going, that's where you should go. And as long as you're with us, you're a part of us. We're not a place where we ask you that you believe. We only ask that you believe with all your heart. And the only way we know you're living by your beliefs is to the extent that you live them with the compassion, love, commitment to liberty and justice that is true in every faith community if we allow ourselves to see it and hear it as it truly speaks. I'm glad you're here today. I'm here also to tell you that there will be coffee afterward in our social hall. There are other things you can find out about through literature here and there. And what I'd like to let you know now is that while I am not changing the hymns around, Bob and Marilyn are changing the two pieces of music around, because the one that's coming up, the one that says Jubal's Lyre, is very earnest and energetic, and then to go from that to a prayerful moment seemed a little too much of a left turn or a right turn. The Arioso, which you'll recognize, is a more suitable place to go as we turn our hearts toward the contemplative and the prayerful. the trombone is perhaps the instrument most similar to its ancient self that's still used in the modern orchestra. It was originally called a sackbut, an unkind sounding name, but it's the same instrument, long tube, slide. And it's one of the few instruments that appeared in church music for a long time because it sounds more like a human voice than almost any other instrument. And so they were added to help support voices in medieval and Renaissance choirs. I know this because I used to play the trombone, never as well as Bob did. But as he was finishing, and I was remembering that it was used in religious services because it blended so well with the human voice, because it was the most human sounding instrument. It made me remember a hymn tune that we sometimes sing, "Come thou fount of every blessing," in which we have the text, "Tune our hearts to sing thy praise." When we come here to worship, we are retuning our hearts so that we might be more in tune. And in the trombone, you have to move the slide a little this way or a little that way to get the note just right. Because if you don't, you won't be in tune. Sadly, if your piano's out of tune, I'm not saying that Marilyn's piano is out of tune, you can't make the note any different. It's going to be out of tune. But the trombone can tune its heart, can adjust, can accommodate the vicissitudes of life. As we enter a time of prayer and meditation, let's start with that notion that we all enter the world unsure of our song. And as we grow up and learn how to sing the various melodies of love and work, of neighborliness and care, we do fall out of tune from time to time. And so we come to places like this to listen for the true note. The true note meaning the one we can depend on, that which is true, can be depended upon. And here we tighten or loosen the strings, we adjust the length of our trombone until we can make a note that echoes that true note. And from there we can make music with overtones and harmonics. We can play the etudes of life until they turn into music. We run the scales of rejoicing. We do the poses of dancing. We go one after another, tuning our hearts, tuning our souls, tuning our minds, hoping that perhaps now and then a word, a gesture, an act, or even just a witness will add a true note to the song, to the symphony of being. Ancient of days, recall to us the note that we were born to sing, the song we were given when we entered the world, the one we wish to sing that will continue to ring after we have died. Show us the work, the moment, the thing, the act, the deed that will leave something better for us having been here on this planet. Open our hearts, open our ears, open our eyes, open our minds to the true note, to the true song that we are all trying to sing. Upon these things, we turn our hearts in silence that our inner ear may listen the more. With reluctance to leave the silence, we say, so be it, and amen. So I debated this morning whether or not to wear my ice cream suit. And this is Labor Day weekend, and I can't by next week if I am a man of reading, so I had to wear it today. I'm mentioning that because our wonderful executive director, Jack Wohler, here is pointing his phone at me because right now we are live on Facebook. Hello, Facebook. I hope you're all well, for all of you who are watching. Perhaps we'll be doing more of this because there are people who can't be here for a variety of reasons, so we wish to go to them. The way our care choir goes to people who are disconnected and want to feel the love that we have for each other. Now let's see if I can get things started here. All right, let's start with this first slide. Who remembers the test pattern? I'm putting it up there because when I was maybe 6 years old, we'd wake up early on a Saturday morning. My brother and I, and later my sisters, would want to watch the early morning cartoons on television. But we always woke up earlier than the TV stations were on. And overnight they broadcast a test pattern with a nasty noise, as I remember. And we would wait and wait and wait, and then eventually this would happen. And I have to start this.
Industry on parade. A pictorial review of events in business and industry, produced each week by the National Association of Manufacturers.
And that would come on afterward. And I remembered the turning cog wheel and everything else. I looked it up, obviously, when I was preparing this sermon. Today, if you watch cable television, you might run into something called How It's Made on the Science Channel or some such place. And it shows products as they're being created from raw materials into finished product. And the machines whirl and turn, and things go back and forth, and you rarely actually see a human being. The machinery is so efficient. I grew up thinking that all those wheels, that's what work was. People doing things, making things. Wheels turning, pistons pumping, conveyors conveying, harvesters reaping. Let me go to the next one here so you can see what I mean. Now, those are two pictures in a different location in my life. That one on the left is a tile wall in the Plzeňska Beer Hall in Prague. I went there 15 years ago to have a beer, obviously, and I saw murals, as you can see on the left, of workers robustly farming the food out there on the good Soviet plains, or in this case, the good Czechoslovakian plains. And that was to show us where that food came from. The long sausages, the thick stews, the large loaves of dark bread washed down with tall steins of beer. That's real work. Planting, harvesting, baking, eating. Work meant that. It meant this. If you look in the upper left, there's Diego Rivera's mural down at the Detroit Institute of Arts. Men turning, heaving, hauling, making the machinery go. There on the right, a wonderful painting from 19th century America, farming down the rows in the hills like that. My father did not do that. He was a white-collar worker, wore a suit and a hat every morning, carried a briefcase, took the bus home. I did not grow up with that as my life, but on my block and in my neighborhood, we had carpenters and firefighters and people who wore work clothes, and I don't mean suits, who had tools that they took to work and brought home. And rather than feeling better than them, I envied their children because their parents did stuff, made things, had something to show for it. My father simply vanished for a few hours a day and came back looking none the worse for wear. Little surprised that my favorite book when I was a child was Mike Mulligan and the Steam Shovel. You remember Mike Mulligan dug the foundation and couldn't get out, and so they built the building around the steam shovel, which became the furnace. Oh, I wanted to be a steam shovel driver. doing something, lifting things. Labor Day in America is not what it was when I was a boy, certainly not what it was when my father was a boy. In 1964, when I was 11 years old, a third of U.S. workers were in unions, U.S. workers. And here in Michigan, 45% were unionized. Today, nationally, 1 in 10 belong to a union, and 14.5% of Michigan workers are unionized, which doesn't mean there are fewer workers, they're just not as unionized. In some respects, there are fewer, but we do different work now. And I could decry this. In fact, I will make sure you see the pictures here. There you go. Union membership in the United States peaked right around 1960. And it's been going down ever since. Now, I could decry this, and the spirits know that I should preach a sermon on the decline and fall of organized labor and the decline and fall of workers and their dignity. It's a worthy sermon, but that's not what I'm going to do today. I will call to your attention that if you like weekends, thank a union. If you like health insurance, thank a union. If you like equitable pay in some jobs, thank a union. It was not given to you by the benevolent thought of the U.S. Congress, but by the insistent work of unions. My purpose this morning, though, is not to argue politics or policy, although they are well worth arguing. It is to recover, I think, the spiritual meaning of work itself, which has been lost in all the discussions and arguments and political maneuverings of the last 40 years. And to start, I'm going to go back to the very beginning. And the Lord God took the man and put him into the Garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it. Even before Adam had a mate, even before Adam had a name, the person had a job. And that job was to take care of the stuff, to dress it and keep it, or till it, as it says in some translations. Barely into the Bible, humans are given a job. In fact, it is their purpose. Odd when you consider that there in the Garden of Eden, everything is supposedly perfect. What possible work could a person need to do if God made everything just right? So it says somehow that maybe we were needed even at the beginning to improve things. The Bible says, as much as you may like it or not, that we were created to work. That is our purpose. Not to worship, that won't happen for another several chapters. Not to reproduce, that'll wait at least 2 chapters. And it's not just the Bible. An ancient Roman author named Appius Claudius Caecus uses the term homo faber, man the maker, to describe our destiny and our nature. We make things. We have the capacity to change things. Luminaries like Hannah Arendt and Henri Bergson use that same term, homo faber, to describe the dignity of the human creature as the creature that makes things. We used to think, of course, that tools was one of the things that set us apart from the other animals. It turns out primates and birds have been using them for a very long time, but they still haven't built factories, to my knowledge, or created industries. To make is our nature. To work is our task, and that the Bible was not wrong. And in fact, in other traditions, the job of us to work, to do things well, is inherent. I was in India back in January, and you become familiar on the way in of the notion of karma, which is not fate. It's what you do. And your work, the acts that you undertake, have an impact beyond your own life. We were created to do things, to make things. It is our job. Now, for those of us who do not use our hands to make a living, that would be me, we get an ancient sense of that perhaps in different ways. I don't know what you do. Some of you might go down into your shop and putter with your woodworking. Some of you may have crafts that you can make and take pride in. Me, I do 2 things. I either pull weeds or shovel snow. Those are your outdoor choices in Michigan. If it's winter, you're shoveling. If it's spring, you're weeding. Now, you can blame my father that I don't use tools. He was never fond of them himself. But my grandfather was a grocer and a farmer and a dairyman. He used his hands his whole life. And he was a graduate of Lehigh University and had a degree in engineering. But I can pull weeds, and I do. It's one of the few places in life where I can be violent without repercussions, so far as I know. And when in snow, I can shovel snow to a fare thee well. And when I'm finished, it gives me satisfaction because I have something to show for my effort. I see the cleaner garden, the drier driveway, unlike the work I do here where every 7 days I got to do this all over again, and I never quite get it right. I want to be of use. And that's where my next slide comes along. This is a poem by Marge Piercy. Let me read it to you. It's called To Be of Use. The people I love the best jump into the work head first without dallying in the shallows and swim off with sure strokes almost out of sight. They seem to become natives of that element, the black, sleek heads of seals bouncing like half-submerged balls. I love people who harness themselves, an ox to a heavy cart, who pull like water buffalo with massive patience, who strain in the mud and muck to move things forward, who do what has to be done again and again. I want to be with people who submerge in the task, who go into the fields to harvest and work in a row and pass the bags along, who are not parlor generals and field deserters, but move in a common rhythm when the food must come in or the fire be put out. The work of the world, she says, is common as mud. Botched, it smears the hands, it crumbles to dust. But the thing worth doing well has a shape that satisfies, clean and evident. Greek amphoras for wine or oil, Hopi vases that hold corn are put in museums, but you know they were meant to be used. The pitcher cries out for water to carry, and a person for work that is real. Real work is sorely absent in our world. The work that leaves fingerprints behind. Few do it anymore, and let's be grateful for the lack of drudgery in our lives, as our opening hymn pointed out. Instead of tilling the garden, we sell futures and derivatives of what we think will grow in the garden. Then we go and enter data about what grew and what didn't grow, and then we file reports for the higher-ups to read so they can go brainstorm and strategize with their friends at meetings and form committees to decide what will be grown next time and how much. No, I don't mean that this is worthless or that it's not work, but its value is abstract and distant without something tangible to show for it. Work in our lives is a means, not an end. In that first scene in the Bible, they did something and that was their task. It was not a means, it was their end. But now we do things in order to get things. The infamous Karl Marx observed that the worker does not fulfill himself in his work, but denies himself, has a feeling of misery rather than well-being, does not develop freely his mental and physical energies, but is physically exhausted and debased. The worker, therefore, feels himself at home only in his leisure, whereas at work he feels homeless. It is not the satisfaction of a need, but a means for satisfying other needs. Labor produces itself and the worker as a commodity. And look at this. Money is the alienated essence of man's work and existence. This essence dominates him and he worships it. You may not like Karl Marx, but you cannot deny that he is speaking a truth we have all experienced. We do our jobs not because they are work that means something, but because they pay us money so we can go have a meaningful life, generally cleaning up our homes, pulling up our weeds, shoveling our snow, and hoping retirement will reach us before illness. We have lost work as part and parcel of why we live. Like him or not, Marx has a point. Modern society turned honest work into tasks for money. And that reduces us to money. What's your net worth? People say. And what do you think? You think of dollars, not good deeds. You think of your wealth, not your works. You think of property, not the people you know. And yet those other things are the things you really own. Your money owns you. It's measuring you. It's deciding how big, how small you are. As Henry Kissinger, I think, famously said, all men are tall when they stand on their money. Abraham Lincoln, though, also understood, as did Karl Marx. In speaking to the Congress as in his first message as president, he said, labor is prior to and independent of capital. Capital is only the fruit of labor and could never have existed if labor had not first existed. Labor is the superior of capital and deserves much the higher consideration, which is why we have a Department of Labor, not a Department of Capital. Or you could say that Congress is the Department of Capital. But that's another discussion, not for today. My point here is that we can all acknowledge that industry, modernity, has many blessings, but one of the costs is that we no longer live for our work. We work to live. We no longer feel the connection that we did in ancient times, that our labor mattered to us and to others, not just for the money, but for the good it did and the products it made and the service it renders. Some few of us, and I include myself, get to do jobs where we feel like we're adding value to the world, but most people don't. Who here remembers the movie Lilies of the Field? Sidney Poitier portrays a man who was inveigled by a band of German nuns who live in the American desert to build them a chapel. They speak marginal English, and when he asks to be paid, he argues with his Mother Superior by pointing to passages in the Bible. He points to a passage in 1 Timothy, the laborer is worthy of his hire. She looks it up in German to understand exactly what he means. Then she flips back to Matthew. Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow, how they toil not, neither do they spin, saying he's been lazy all this time. It's a marvelous scene. If the worker is alienated from the work, religion is even more alienated from work, isn't it? After all, it takes place on the Sabbath, the day we're not supposed to work. Of course, that was a day that we gave up not working a long time ago. Now we can go and do other work, shopping notably. Because back in those other days, the blue laws all over the country, not just here, enforced the notion that piety and dullness were essential to good religion. And that sure made us love church so much that we went there all the time. But it also means in a deeper sense that we think of religion as something we think in our heads and feel, not something we do, and it's not something we make. We partake of religion abstractly rather than take part in it actively. And no wonder we almost unconsciously wonder if while we're sitting here I'm getting my money's worth, not just my time's worth. Is it any wonder that churches with large Broadway shows and rock music like worship services are growing? They give a better bang for their buck. That's how we measure what matters. How much is it worth in dollars, in time? Forgetting that it is the doing, not the receiving, where the value lies. That's why I have Oscar Wilde down there. It was in a play that he wrote, "What is a cynic? Someone who knows the price of everything and the value of nothing." In our modern consumer-driven society, we all fall prey to treating work as a means to living our lives. And money is the thing that measures how good our life is. But if Lincoln is right, and the Bible, and Marx, and Oscar Wilde, it is meaningful work that actually makes our lives meaningful and valuable. People volunteer here at this church. We give them not a penny. Why do they do it? because they sense that doing that is valuable to them and to others. They've received value by being of service to this church and to its community. They come away like the care choir, feeling cared for as well as caring for. We create value here, not for you, with you. We create meaning here together as we make communities and efforts. We don't sell you a ticket to heaven. We don't promise you some hope that you'll never be able to know in this life. All we do is give you a chance to do real work, which is how you grow a soul when you think about it. How else will you become spiritual unless you start doing it? If you're waiting for that lightning bolt of spirituality to strike you, Chuck Close will say, you'll never get it. Start being spiritual rather than waiting to feel it. Do the work rather than look for the value. Religion is a labor of the heart. At its best, it seeks to make life a value-added experience. And honestly, you do not need God to make your life better. If that helps, we will help you use God. But our task is not, first of all, to worship. It is to till the garden and keep it. That's our mission, friends. Make the world better than you found it. And thankfully, or ironically, that's not all that hard to do. There's a lot out there you can do. This year I'm going to try to help you. We're going to explore this through religion in something I'm calling living by heart. That is to say, finding ways to live more deeply by cultivating your soul garden, cultivating those habits of the heart, as Alexis de Tocqueville called it. I consider mores to be one of the great general causes responsible for the maintenance of the democratic republic. The term mores meaning habits of the heart. I want you to join me and others in cultivating practices and dispositions and work and labor that will cultivate habits of the heart that will be good for the democracy of the community and the wholeness of your integrity. You got something in the mail, and if you didn't, I'll give you one. You must do this. If you intend to live a spiritual life and you're waiting for me to give it to you, you're not going to get it, but I can show you where you can go. It's right there. It is work, friends, this spiritual stuff, this soul work. And it's not something you can do by sampling now and then, like once a month in church. You can't do it as a hobby by reading a book and going to a seminar once a year. You cannot watch it from a distance like a lecture or a really well-crafted show. You have to do it. You have to do it also in concert with others, because none of us has enough to do it by ourselves. Because we were made to make. We were made to make. We were created to create. We were planted to grow. We were given the task of building a world that has value. And here is where we remind ourselves of it. In some respects, I'm here every week to scold you. And you want to be scolded. And remembering, I'm also scolding myself at the same time. The work we crave to do is not just for our own spiritual pleasure, but for everyone. Even when we grow vegetables, don't we often give a few away? And don't we feel better about the ones we give than the ones we keep? We all want to leave our fingerprints upon tomorrow. Why can we not do that? We can. The pitcher cries for water to carry and a person for work that is real. You know it is true. And when you think about it, could anything be more religious than this longing for work that matters? Is there anything more spiritual? Is there anything more real than this? No. So get out of here and work as though your soul depended on it. May it be, and amen.